Hey guys, welcome back to my channel and to another doll customizing video. In today's video, I will be sharing with you another unicorn inspired doll. The last doll I made was very sweet and pastel, as you can see. She is very light and colorful, but this time around I wanted to make her sister, which will be the exact opposite, and she will be dark and evil. If you haven't already, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and join me in future doll customizing videos. With that said, let's go ahead and get started. For this doll, I decided to use a Monster High Frankie Stein doll, mainly because I had two of them and I haven't customized a Frankie on this channel yet. In order to get her ready for customization, I remove her hair using scissors, wipe off her face using 100% acetone, and use an X-Acto knife and a little bit of acetone to remove her body marks. I also chose this doll because I didn't want the doll herself to have a dark skin tone. I wanted to use that color for her accessories and hair, so I thought Frankie would be a good choice. Since I'm using the same process I used to create the unicorn horn and ears for the last unicorn inspired doll, I will be skipping a little bit faster through this process. If you want a better look through that process, go ahead and check out my last unicorn doll because I do go a little bit more in depth on how I create the horn and ears. I've actually been looking into a couple different ways I want to make horns, and they will be a little bit better and easier and faster, but that will mean that I will be making future unicorn dolls, so if you guys want that, I can make another one, but if not, I might save that for a couple months down the line. Since this part is pretty self-explanatory, I will take the opportunity to ask you guys a question, and that is, do you guys watch my videos more for the face-up process or more for the clothing and accessory design? I'm actually really curious to see what you guys answer because while I do love doing face-ups, there is a part of me that really likes doing fashion and clothes for these dolls. I really like it in my own style, but this doll particularly, I had a dress that I wanted to make her, so I was really inspired by that, and the face-up was kind of a little bit second place. With that said, let's move on to her outfit. I ended up making this doll the same pair of gold pants that I made my last unicorn doll, so if you want to see how I made these, it will be in my other video. Her pants are pretty cropped because I already had a pair of shoes in mind that I wanted to use, so that's why I made them a little bit shorter than the last dolls. For this doll, I ended up altering an old pattern that I had into this new V-neck shape, so that is what I'm showing you now. I am also going to show you how I ended up making the big collar that I made for this doll because that was pretty much what inspired this whole other dark unicorn doll. I started by figuring out the front part V-neck to see what was the shape I needed for this doll. It ended up working out not very well because after I sewed everything together, the back part of the collar was too short, and I will show you that later and how I ended up fixing this and making a new pattern. This is the collar pattern I ended up making, but I do scrap it and make a new one later on, but for the time being that is what I used. And I also used two sleeves, the front V-neck, and two back pieces. Here I am at my fabric store in the metallic print pattern section. My last unicorn doll had a slight shine to the gold stars on her dress, and this is the section that carries those type of fabrics. As you can see, some of them have a little bit of a metallic shine to them, and this was the fabric that drew my attention. It is more of a black and silver print. Here are the pattern pieces all cut out in the new fabric. I decided to give her short sleeves because I didn't want this dark fabric to feel heavy on her and weigh her down, and I also wanted a little bit of her arms to peek through. The first thing I do is sew the front piece and the two back pieces together at the shoulders. I also hemmed the sleeves and I made the collar piece, but this ended up being too short, as you can see here. Once I've added the sleeves to the front and back pieces and I try to measure up the collar piece, it does not line up very well. It is way too short, so I ended up making a new pattern. Here is the new pattern piece I ended up making. It is much bigger than the last piece that I made and it fits really well on the doll. The only weird thing was that I ended up making it a tube in order to make it lay flat and look nice in the end. So the outside edges are sewed and the inside neckline is sewed, so it's pretty hard to turn it inside out, and then after that I ended up sewing it around the edges and the neckline to get rid of that poofy look that it had and make it lie flat once I attached it to the shirt. After sewing the shirt closed, I ended up trying it on the doll to make sure that it fit right and it wasn't too big or too small. I also wanted to see how the collar fit and it looks so good. This is exactly how big and dramatic I wanted it to be. After trying that on, I move on to the skirt, which I use the same pattern piece that I used for my last unicorn doll's dress, except this time I made it 2 layers and the second layer is longer. The first thing I did was hem the bottom raw edges of the 2 pieces, and the next thing I did was I sewed them together around the waistline about 2 centimeters away in order to allow me to cut off this under bottom pieces fabric. I do this because I didn't want the 2 layers of fabric to bunch up too much around the waistline, or else it would be too much fabric and it wouldn't lay properly, so that is why I ended up cutting it off, but you can't see that in the final product. I'm sorry if that doesn't really make sense, but it did end up helping on the waistline because it wasn't very bunchy at all. And the last thing I do to finish up this dress is add some Velcro around the back and the collar. Here is the dress all complete. I really like it. It is pretty different, but kind of similar to the last unicorn doll's dress, which I think really works since they are sisters. The last bit of detail I add to this dress, and another way to make the 2 dolls look similar, was adding this wavy ribbon. All I did was tie it around her waist and let the rest of it hang behind her. Moving on to shoes, these were the boots that I had in mind. They are a pair of Monster High Claudine boots, and I really liked how they looked on this doll because of the spikes, and I really wanted to really bring out that detail, so I used some black paint, magenta paint, and some gray paint in order to bring out those spikes. Finally, moving on to the face up, I started by drawing in her top eyeliner, and Frankie's face is kind of difficult to draw on, so that's why I kind of skipped over drawing that part. But the next thing I do is move on to the lips, and I use a gray watercolor pencil to lightly sketch that in before later on using a black pencil. I also used a dark shade of green pastels to shade around her nose and around the crease of her eye just to add a bit more dimension and shadows. I will be using glitter around her horn like I did for the other doll, so I lay down a layer of black, purple, and blue pastels around her horn, forehead, and the side of her face. I also used the black pastels to give her a bit of a smoky eye look, and I used the dark green pastels to shade around her cheekbones. Next, I move on to filling in the whites of her eyes using my white Derwent watercolor pencil. Here I'm adding the blue pastels. I felt like the face was missing it, so that's why I decided to add it a little bit later on. Before spraying a second layer of Mr. Super Clear, I decided to add the top eyelashes. I normally save this for future layers because eyelashes are more in detail, and the first layer is usually just to get base shapes and colors down, but I guess I was feeling confident, so I decided to add them now. Using the same brown watercolor pencil, I also add a crease to her eye. After the second layer of MSC, the first thing I did was fill in the whites of her eyes again before moving on to black onto her top eyeliner, eyelashes, the crease in her eye, and I also added it to her lips. I knew I had to give this doll black lips because if I gave her pink lips or magenta lips, I knew that she would look a little too sweet or cute, and I really wanted to try a new color, so that's why I decided on black. Another thing I do before adding blush to her face one more time is I do the eyebrows, because if I mess up the eyebrows and I have to erase it, I don't want to leave streaks in the newly layered pastels, so that's why I do the eyebrows, and then once those are good, I redo the blush. After getting the rough shape of the eyebrows down, I wanted her to feel a bit more edgy, so I decided to add a few lines into her eyebrows, making it seem as if she had shaved a few lines into them. Since my black watercolor pencil wasn't able to reach the inside creases of her lips, I had to use a wet brush and my pencil in order to finish drawing in and making sure that they looked complete. With a third layer of Mr. Super Clear sprayed, I finally start adding darker colors and adding a bit more detail to the face. Here I'm going over her eyebrows with my black watercolor pencil because I will be giving her black hair. I go over the whites of her eyes one more time with that white pencil before using my pink watercolor pencil to draw in her waterline. Now I take my black watercolor pencil to draw a line going around her waterline from the top, going thinner as I reach the inner corner of her eye. After I have that line in position, I start adding triangular shaped eyelashes. I only added a few eyelashes this time because I didn't want her face up to feel heavy because this is a pretty dark face up compared to my other ones. To give a bit more dimension to her eyeshadow, I used a lime green pencil to color in the inner part of her eye. The last thing I do before spraying another layer of Mr. Super Clear is draw in the shape of her pupil with my gray watercolor pencil. After I'm satisfied with the layers of pastels that I have on her face and I feel like the colors are saturated, I go ahead and start adding glitter to those sections. I used my purple glitter on the purple sections, an iridescent blue on the blue sections, and I also used an iridescent purple on the black sections. This is her face up nearly complete. All I need to do is finish coloring in her irises and pupils and adding a bit more shadow and dimension to her face up overall. After going over the whites of her eyes one more time, I finally take that black pencil and draw in the shapes of her eyes. This is the process that I've been doing for a while. It's just really easy for me because it helps with the placement and making sure that both sides are relatively even. After I have those shapes down, all I do is add black to the top half of her eye and a magenta to the bottom half. This is towards the end of her face up, but I wasn't really happy with the color saturation in her eyes or the shadows and highlights, so I decided to use the wet brush with the watercolor pencil method and finish in adding all those colors. I've actually completed a few new face-ups after this doll. I'm recording this a little late, but I'm actually really happy with this method. I've gotten a lot better, so it is a method that I will be using in future customs. And as I was spraying her with a final layer of Mr. Super Clear, this happened. It completely ruined the face-up, so I had to start over. It left her with all these dots, and I was so devastated. But I had to do it again, and let me tell you, it is pretty much the exact same thing. I don't know how I did it, but it worked out in the end. Now that the face up is complete, I'm going to be starting on the hair using some acrylic yarn that I bought from Hobby Lobby to glue onto her head. If there's any of you who want to use acrylic yarn hair for dolls, I would definitely recommend this yarn hair because it is pretty much already brushed out, so you don't have to spend money on a dog hair brush in order to brush out some other acrylic yarns. I gave this doll a similar ombre hair look as I did for my other unicorn doll, but this time I used some white to gray wefts, and for the top I used black wefts. And I styled her hair pretty much the same because I will be adding glitter around her face, so this hairstyle is pretty easy for that. Again, I'm using these pixie paints that I have from when I was doing face painting, and I'm mixing it with some glossy Mod Podge. I mix a little bit of each of these colors together with the Mod Podge, and I add it around the face and around the horn before I finally assemble her and take some final photos. Here she is all put together. I'm so happy to finally have her done. I wanted her to be done ever since I came up with the idea to make my unicorn doll a sister. I really love her style compared to my other unicorn doll. They contrast each other so well, and she just looks so majestic and mysterious. And of course, my favorite part about this doll is definitely that dress, the collar. I'm just so happy with how it turned out. I love hearing what you guys think of my custom dolls, so let me know what your favorite part about this doll was in the comments below. This is the end of the video, you guys. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to leave a like and subscribe if you are new. Feel free to leave me any questions or comments in the comment section below. And again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in another video.